Let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone look you in the eye, someone you love, someone you raised, and mock something that once defined you? Have you ever sat across from your own child and felt the sting of being laughed at, not for a joke you cracked, but for your life's work, your sacrifice, your education? That happened to me. And not in passing. No, this wasn't a careless comment. My daughter laughed at my college degree, sneered at the framed piece of paper that hung above my desk like a proud banner of where I came from, how far I'd traveled, and all the nights I stayed up studying while she was asleep in her crib. And I'm going to tell you what I did next, but I want you to listen closely, because by the time we reach the end, you'll see how one decision turned a small insult into a legacy carved in stone. Literally. Now, before you click away or think, oh, this is just another story of parental revenge, stop right there. This isn't about spite. This isn't just about a grudge. It's about identity. It's about respect. It's about a generational gap so wide that even love can't always bridge it until something forces it to. And if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had someone treat your experience like a punchline, this story is for you. You came here because the title sparked something in you, curiosity, maybe a little outrage, maybe a pinch of laughter yourself. But I promise by the end of this video, you're going to understand why I did what I did, and maybe even find the courage to reclaim something of your own. Let me back up and give you a picture. I'm not a flashy man. Never have been. I've lived my life by the book, worked hard, paid my dues, kept my head down. I went to college later in life, after raising my daughter as a single father. I earned my degree in my early 40s, not at an Ivy League school, not at some name-brand institution, but a solid local state university. It was a degree in education, something I'd always wanted to do: teach, guide, be a mentor. I framed that degree myself. It wasn't about prestige, it was about the principle. I wanted my daughter to see that learning is lifelong, that growth never stops, that dedication matters, no matter your age. And for the most part, I thought she understood that. At least, I thought she did. Fast forward to her senior year of college, some fancy East Coast university, with a price tag that could pay for a small house. She was brilliant, no doubt. Honors student, fast-tracked to law school, admired by her professors, admired by everyone, really. I was proud. How could I not be? But something had shifted in her over the years. The little girl who used to ask me to proofread her book reports was now someone who rolled her eyes at the way I spoke. She used words like cringe when I talked about my teaching methods. She started speaking to me like I was someone beneath her. It hurt, but I told myself she was just growing up, trying to find her own voice. Then came that dinner. That one dinner where everything broke open. We were sitting around the table with a few of her college friends, sharp, sophisticated, polished types. And in the middle of our conversation, one of them asked me about my background. Innocent question. I started talking about my degree, about teaching in the public school system, and before I could even finish, my daughter, my own daughter, laughed. Right there, in front of everyone. She laughed. "Dad, no offense," she said, waving her hand like she was brushing me off, "but no one takes a community college degree seriously anymore. You know that, right?" I laughed too, at first thinking it was a joke. But her eyes didn't soften. They stayed hard, dismissive. And that's when I realized she wasn't teasing me. She meant it. Her friends gave polite chuckles, shifting uncomfortably, and I excused myself shortly after. I don't remember driving home that night, but I remember how the silence in my car felt louder than her words. Now, I'm not a petty man. I didn't yell. I didn't cut her off. I didn't even bring it up again. But inside, something started to grow. Not anger, no. Resolve. If she thought my degree was a joke, then maybe it was time to show her what real education looked like. What real legacy looked like. And that's when I came up with the plan. Not for revenge, but for remembrance. A move so calculated, so poetic, that one day, she'd walk into her own future and see my name carved into its foundation. I started making calls. Quietly. Discreetly. I looked into her university's fundraising efforts. Turns out, the library, a centerpiece of campus life, was in desperate need of renovation. It was an old building, historically significant, but falling apart from the inside. The school had launched a quiet capital campaign, searching for donors willing to help fund a $10 million overhaul. It wasn't public yet, but with the right connections and enough zeros, anything is possible. I'd saved for years. I had inheritance money tucked away. I'd lived frugally, invested wisely. And now, I had a chance to do something that would leave a mark, not just for me, but for every late bloomer, every overlooked teacher, every parent who ever sacrificed everything just to be dismissed at the dinner table. But here's the twist, and I won't give everything away just yet. I didn't do it for credit. I didn't do it to get applause. I did it because I knew that one day, when the dust settled and the renovations were done, my daughter would walk into that library, her arms full of law textbooks, her mind racing with deadlines, and she'd see it. In bold letters, etched across the marble entrance, the James T. Merrick Library for Lifelong Learning. My name, my story, my legacy, right there, at the heart of the very institution she once used to belittle me. And you might be wondering, how did she find out? What happened when she saw it? Did she feel regret? Shame? Did it bring us closer? Or drive us further apart? Well, the real story starts right there. Because what unfolded next wasn't just about a building. It wasn't even about me anymore. It was about reckoning, reflection, and the power of one bold move to rewrite everything we thought we knew about family, pride, and the meaning of education. But I'll save that part for what comes next, because trust me, you'll want to hear how the truth finally hit her and how I was standing right behind her when it did. I wasn't looking for revenge when I made the first call to the university's development office. In fact, I almost hung up before anyone answered. But something in me, a mixture of pride and heartbreak, compelled me to stay on the line. They connected me with a well-spoken woman in alumni relations who initially thought I was joking. "You want to make an anonymous donation for the library renovations?" she asked, her tone polite but doubtful. "In your name?" I told her yes. And I made it clear, this wasn't about ego. It was about impact. I wanted my name associated not with wealth or prestige, but with persistence, with purpose, with the idea that education, in all its messy, unpredictable forms, matters, even if it doesn't come from a building with ivy-covered walls. The paperwork alone took weeks. Contracts, tax structures, naming rights, all of it had to be meticulously negotiated. I insisted that no press be released until the renovations were complete. No articles. No public thank you dinners. I didn't want it to feel like a stunt. I wanted it to exist. I wanted her to stumble upon it naturally, without fanfare, without a hint of expectation. But while the university was cooperative, something odd began to happen. I'd get calls late at night. No one there when I answered. Emails bounced back that I hadn't sent. Then came the letter. A single, handwritten envelope slid beneath my apartment door one evening. No return address. No name. Just 6 words scrawled on lined paper in shaky block letters. Asterisk. You don't know what she's done. Asterisk. I froze. At first, I thought it was some twisted prank. A neighbor's kid maybe, or a student playing games. But the message burrowed under my skin. It felt targeted. Deliberate. The way it was written, stiff, like someone trying too hard to hide their handwriting, made me wonder if this wasn't about the donation at all. I tucked the letter into my desk drawer and tried to shake it off. But then the calls started again. Always from different numbers. Always silent. I'd answer, hear the faint static of the line, and then nothing. Just breathing. Sometimes hurried, sometimes slow. And one night, just before I was about to hang up, I heard a voice, a whisper, like wind curling through a cracked window. You think you know her. You don't. Now let me say this. I've never been a paranoid man. I don't believe in conspiracies or ghosts. But when patterns emerge, you start asking questions. I started wondering if my daughter had gotten herself into something. Or someone. The world she inhabited at that elite university was so far removed from mine, it might as well have been another planet. Private clubs. Internships at places with names that sounded like surnames. Professors who wrote op-eds in the Atlantic. She'd dated a few older guys, always hush-hush about the details. One of them, Derek, I think, once showed up to our Thanksgiving dinner in a $1,000 jacket and spent the whole night talking about crypto like he'd invented the blockchain himself. I didn't like him, and I was relieved when she said they'd broken up. But something about the way she avoided eye contact whenever I asked about her relationships, it lingered. One weekend, I decided to visit campus under the guise of attending a public lecture. She didn't know I was coming. I figured I'd surprise her. Maybe grab lunch, talk like we used to. When I arrived, I was shocked at how much had changed. The old quad had been completely overhauled, sculptures replaced, trees uprooted and replanted. Students passed me by like I was invisible, earbuds in, heads down. I found her dorm building, sleek, all glass and concrete, and waited outside, unsure what I was even doing. That's when I saw her. But she wasn't alone. She was with a man mid-40s, maybe older, dressed too sharply to be a professor. They weren't holding hands, but the way they stood, slightly turned into each other, their body language whispered a kind of intimacy that made me uneasy. I ducked behind a column, heart pounding, watching as they disappeared into the parking garage beneath the student center. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. It wasn't just the surprise of seeing her with someone who clearly wasn't her peer. It was the look on her face. Not love.
Not joy.
It was fear. Not overt, not panicked, but real.
Subtle.
And that expression lodged itself in my memory like a stone. When I got home, I dug out the letter again and stared at it for what felt like hours. What didn't I know about my daughter? What had she gotten into? Was someone using her? Or worse, was she using someone else? I started keeping a log. Dates, names, suspicious calls, everything. I still wasn't sure if the letter was about her behavior, the donation, or something altogether darker. But I had a gut feeling, one I'd learned to trust after years of reading between the lines with troubled students. Something was off. And now, I wasn't just a father trying to leave a legacy. I was a man trying to uncover a truth no one else seemed willing to see. But every lead I followed raised more questions. A campus assistant who recognized me told me in hushed tones that my daughter had recently been called into a closed-door meeting with the university ethics committee. No one knew why. A former friend of hers, someone she'd cut ties with months ago, messaged me anonymously through Facebook with a vague warning. Asterisk, you need to ask her about the foundation. Asterisk, but when I tried to trace the profile, it was gone within minutes. What foundation? What had she signed up for? Who was that man? And what exactly had I stepped into by putting my name and my past at the heart of a place that might not be as honorable as it pretended to be? The deeper I dug, the more tangled the story became. And soon, it wasn't just about a daughter mocking her father's degree. It was about a university with secrets, a donation that stirred unwanted attention, and a truth that could shatter the very relationship I was trying to protect. And I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. Because one evening, just as I thought I was piecing it all together, I got a package. No return address. No note. Just a single, worn book. The library's old registry ledger, missing for over a decade, filled with annotations, strange markings, and a name on nearly every page.
Mine.
And just like that, everything I thought I knew collapsed into something far more dangerous. To be continued. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the library ledger until my eyes blurred. It was heavy in a way that went beyond weight, like it carried something old, something rotten. Its leather was cracked and dusty, and the pages inside were brittle with time, as though they hadn't been touched in years. But someone had touched them recently, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. My name, James T. Merrick, appeared over and over again, scribbled in the margins of entries that dated back almost 2 decades, long before my daughter had ever stepped foot on that campus. At first, I thought it was some mistake, maybe another Merrick or just some prank. But as I flipped through more pages, I saw notes referencing classes I'd never taught, research grants I never applied for, events I had no memory of attending. Whoever wrote these entries was building a version of me that didn't exist, but somehow lived and breathed in the records of her university. It rattled me. And just when I was about to take photos for proof, the lights in my apartment flickered and cut out completely. Power outage. Just mine. Not the building, just my unit. I reached for my phone, using the flashlight to navigate through the kitchen and down the hall to check the circuit breaker. Everything looked fine. When I returned to the table, the ledger was gone.
Gone.
I searched the entire apartment 3 times, inside cabinets, behind furniture, even the freezer, nothing. I hadn't heard the door open, no windows had been cracked, and there were no signs of a break-in. But that book disappeared like it had never existed, and with it went the only tangible link to the growing mystery that seemed to surround my name, my daughter, and that cursed library. The next morning, I tried calling the woman from Alumni Relations, the one I'd spoken to about the donation, but she was on indefinite leave, according to the automated message. I pressed 0 to reach another representative, hoping someone could tell me more, but the line disconnected before I could explain why I was calling. I tried again. Same result. On the 3rd attempt, I got a man named Nathan who sounded half asleep and half annoyed. When I mentioned the renovation project, he suddenly went very quiet, asked for my name, and then transferred me to someone in legal review. I hung up. Whatever I was brushing up against, it wasn't just a paper trail. It was protected, guarded, maybe even dangerous. Later that day, I received an email, unmarked, no sender, no subject. It simply read, *, stop looking, Mr. Merrick. You've already done enough. *, and underneath that, a single file attachment titled photo.jpg. Against my better judgment, I opened it. What I saw made the blood drain from my face. It was a blurry surveillance image, clearly from a hallway security cam, time-stamped just 4 days earlier. It showed me, standing outside the student center, hiding behind the concrete column, watching my daughter. Someone had been watching me. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboard, every shadow shifting across the walls, made me feel like I was being followed. I started to wonder if the whole thing, the ledger, the calls, the donation, had triggered something much bigger than I realized. Something institutional. Something systemic. Maybe that's why my name was in the ledger. Maybe someone had been using me, borrowing my identity for some kind of academic fraud or financial misdirection. Or maybe the truth was worse. Maybe my daughter was in it, not just as a bystander, but as a player. I didn't want to believe that, but the facts weren't giving me much room for hope. So I made a decision. I contacted one of my oldest friends, Marcus, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who used to work in university systems compliance. He was the kind of guy who wore suspicion like a badge of honor and didn't blink twice at things most people ignored. When I told him the basics, he agreed to meet the next morning at a diner off the interstate, well away from campus and my neighborhood. He showed up late, wearing sunglasses even though the sun hadn't broken through the clouds, and spoke in a voice low enough to be drowned out by the sound of clinking dishes and sizzling bacon. "I shouldn't be here," he said without sitting down. "This isn't just about a bad donation, James. You stumbled into something old. Something they buried for a reason." He told me about a donor scandal from nearly 20 years ago, one involving falsified alumni, phantom professors, and fake research grants meant to boost the school's reputation during accreditation review. He said names had disappeared, not just from payrolls or websites, but from public records entirely. Back then, he whispered, they used fake faculty profiles to funnel money through shell foundations. Some of those names weren't just invented, they were borrowed. You were on a list. I sat there stunned. But I didn't even graduate from that university. "I know," he said. "Which made you perfect. No one would look twice at a name like yours, especially if the paper trail ended with a real person who never set foot on campus." When I asked who else was involved, he hesitated. He looked around, lowered his voice again, and said something I still haven't processed fully. "You need to look at your daughter's scholarship file. It was tied to that same foundation." I couldn't breathe. My daughter's entire education, those elite connections, the tuition waivers, the internships, was that how she got them? Through a scholarship funded by stolen credentials and fake names? "Be careful who you trust," Marcus added. "If I were you, I'd disappear for a while." Then he left. No goodbye. No warning. Just vanished into the parking lot like he'd never been there. That night, I went back through every email, every note, every phone call. And I saw patterns I hadn't noticed before. Dates aligning too perfectly, people appearing in the background of photos more than once, even though they were supposedly strangers. It was like waking up inside someone else's dream. And then, as if the universe wanted to make sure I kept spiraling, a manila envelope arrived in my mailbox, hand-delivered unmarked. Inside were photocopies of university IDs.
Dozens of them.
Different names, different faces, but every single one carried the same ID number. My daughter's. Now I don't know what's worse, that she might be caught up in this without knowing, or that she's known all along and hasn't said a word. But I'm getting close now. Too close, maybe. And whatever's at the bottom of this pit, someone clearly doesn't want me to find it. Because just this morning, as I opened my laptop to dig deeper into the scholarship database, my screen flickered black. And a new message appeared. Asterisk, you've been warned. Next time, we erase more than just records. Asterisk. I sat frozen in front of the screen, the threat still glowing faintly on my laptop, like it was pulsing with quiet malice. Asterisk, next time, we erase more than just records. Asterisk, it wasn't just a warning, it was a line drawn in the sand. Someone was watching me, monitoring every digital move, and they wanted me to know they were capable of reaching into my life and gutting it from the inside out. But what haunted me most was the specificity of it, not just that they could erase files, but that they already had. It made me question what else had been tampered with, without me knowing. How many conversations never reached my inbox. How many documents vanished before I even knew they existed. The world I thought I understood, my daughter, her education, the legacy I was trying to leave, was turning inside out, and the only thing I could do now was keep digging while pretending I wasn't terrified. I tried to go about my day like normal, teaching my classes and nodding through meetings, but my mind was 1,000 miles away. Every student with their head down behind a laptop made me wonder if someone had been sent to monitor me. Every passing glance in the hallway felt a little too long, a little too intentional. Then, just as I was beginning to convince myself I was overthinking, the story took another turn. That evening, just after sunset, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, Melanie Jacobs, my niece. She lived across the country in Oregon and was a research assistant at a university there, the kind who buried herself in grant paperwork and academic citations. We only spoke on holidays and birthdays, and even then, it was usually a polite 2-minute call. But her voice on the line wasn't casual. It was shaky, unsure, and filled with a kind of urgency that made the hairs on my neck rise. She told me she'd received a manila envelope that day. No return address. No message. Just a single item inside, a printed screen capture of my library's donation announcement, which hadn't even gone public yet. And across the image, written in thick black marker, were the words, asterisk, ask your uncle why his name is in our files. Asterisk. Melanie was frightened, not just because of the letter, but because someone had used her work email to send it, her private, university-verified account that wasn't listed publicly anywhere. I thought it was a joke, she said, until I realized someone had to hack into the faculty system to get it. This isn't just a prank, Uncle James. Someone wants me to push you. Or warn you. I reassured her as best I could, though I had no real comfort to offer. Her involvement added a new, unsettling dimension to the already unraveling mystery. If they were reaching out to distant relatives, it meant this wasn't just about me and my daughter. This was a web, and my name was just one knot in the tangled mess. But why Melanie? Why target her now? Out of nowhere. Unless her position as a research assistant wasn't a coincidence. Maybe she'd stumbled across something in her own work, something that overlapped with what I'd uncovered. Maybe someone saw her as a liability. Or maybe they wanted me to think she was one. The moment you realize you can't trust what's real, every relationship begins to feel like a calculated move. Later that night, still shaken by Melanie's call, I returned to my files. I began comparing the names from the stolen ID documents with university directories, trying to find a match. Most were dead ends, either outdated or scrubbed entirely. But one stuck out. A name I recognized from the corner of my memory, Dr. Avery Selwyn. Years ago, He had been the keynote speaker at a regional education conference I attended. A charismatic figure, well-spoken, with a reputation for pushing reform in outdated institutions. He'd spoken with passion about reimagining faculty structures and decentralizing academic credentialing, phrases that now rang with new meaning. I remembered thinking he was too ambitious for his own good, the kind of man who wanted to leave a mark so badly he'd etch it into the walls with a knife if necessary. I searched his name online, but nothing current came up. His professional website was defunct, and the last article attributed to him was over 7 years old. But buried in the archives of a niche academic journal was a footnote that caught my attention. It mentioned a Selwyn protocol, a loosely defined methodology involving rotating faculty identities and using composite profiles for anonymous peer-reviewed publications. At the time, it had been dismissed as theoretical nonsense. Now, it looked like the blueprint for everything I'd found. The fake IDs, the phantom faculty, the repeated use of my name. I had to find him. If he was alive, if he hadn't been disappeared like so many others who'd gotten too close, he might be the only person who could explain why I had become the unwitting centerpiece of this academic forgery. But before I could even begin planning how to track him down, another twist landed like a gut punch. I received a direct message on my rarely used LinkedIn profile. The sender's name was hidden behind an alias, *truth in letters *, but the message was brief and terrifying. Selwyn was your daughter's thesis advisor. He vanished in 2018. Her file says she withdrew the day after. I read it 3 times before the full weight hit me. My daughter had never told me she withdrew from school. Everything she'd said, every update about classes and exams, had been part of an elaborate lie.
But why?
What had happened with Dr. Selwyn? Was she covering something up? Or running from something that went far deeper than I imagined? I didn't know what was real anymore. What part of her life had been genuine? Was the man I saw her with that day connected to Selwyn's disappearance? Had she been threatened into silence, or had she chosen it for herself? And if she had withdrawn from school years ago, then why? How had her name remained on the university's records, even as she continued to live the illusion? Suddenly, it all started to crack. The scholarship, the donation, the silence. The laughter at my degree wasn't mockery. It was misdirection. She had wanted to distract me from asking too many questions. She had wanted me to feel small, so I wouldn't look closer. But now I was looking, and I was seeing too much. But just when I thought I was finally connecting the dots, another message arrived. This one wasn't digital. It was taped to the inside of my car windshield, left in the middle of the night while I slept. One sentence. If you find Selwyn, she dies. And just like that, the rules changed. This wasn't about legacy anymore. It was about survival. To be continued. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying those 7 words over and over. If you find Selwyn, she dies. They rang through my mind like a bell tolling at a funeral I wasn't supposed to attend yet. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was just another scare tactic, a bluff meant to freeze me in place. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was a line in the sand, and I'd stepped over it. Someone out there believed I was getting too close to something they had spent years burying. And they weren't threatening me anymore. They were going after the one person who mattered more than anything else. My daughter. Whatever rift had formed between us, whatever lies she had told, she was still my child. And now, I was in a position where pushing forward could get her killed, but walking away might leave her trapped in something far worse. That kind of fear doesn't come all at once. It seeps in slowly, poisoning every corner of your mind. I checked all the locks on my doors 3 times. I pulled the curtains closed, turned off every light, and sat in the darkness listening for sounds that didn't belong. Footsteps outside the window, the subtle click of a lock being picked, the rustle of paper as another message was slipped under my door. I waited, but nothing came. And that silence only made things worse. By morning, I was exhausted but alert, nerves frayed, my body tense like a wire pulled too tight. I knew I couldn't keep operating in isolation, so I reached back out to Melanie, hoping she could still dig around her university's database for any trace of Selwyn or whatever foundation had its tendrils wrapped around both our lives. But she didn't answer. At first, I told myself she was busy. She was always glued to her lab schedule. Then I tried again. Then again. I left 3 voicemails, sent 2 texts, and finally, in a fit of creeping dread, called her campus office directly. A young-sounding student worker picked up, and when I asked to speak to Melanie Jacobs, her voice turned hesitant. "She hasn't been in today," she said. Actually, she didn't come in yesterday either. My heart dropped into my stomach. I asked if anyone had seen her, if she'd called in sick, but the girl on the phone just kept repeating that she didn't know anything. Her voice faltered, like maybe she was reading from a script, or like someone was standing behind her listening. I hung up and immediately tried reaching Melanie's best friend, a girl named Tara who had been her roommate during grad school. No answer. Her number had been disconnected. I found Tara's LinkedIn, clicked on it, and watched in real time as the profile vanished before my eyes. Deactivated.
Gone.
That's when it hit me. Melanie hadn't just gone quiet. She had been erased. Panic swelled in my chest, thick and paralyzing. I paced the apartment like a caged animal, heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. What had I done? Had I dragged her into something she couldn't get out of? Or had she known more than she told me, and paid the price for reaching out? I needed help. Real help. I couldn't go to the police, not with nothing concrete, not with mysterious emails and missing ledgers and half-whispers about fake faculty and doctored scholarships. To them, I'd sound like another unhinged man with a persecution complex. But I had to tell someone. So I called the one person I hadn't wanted to involve, Daniel Hayes, my old college roommate and now an investigative journalist working for a mid-sized outlet in Chicago. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew he had the contacts and the instincts to sniff out the kind of rot that infected institutions like the one my daughter's university had become. When Daniel picked up, I could hear his coffee brewing in the background, the rustle of newspaper pages. He was still an analog soul in a digital world. "You sound like hell," he said immediately.
I didn't waste time.
I dumped everything, every detail, every name, every message, even the threats. At first, he listened in silence. Then he started asking questions, the kind only a seasoned investigator would know how to frame. When I told him about Selwyn, he stopped me mid-sentence. "Wait," he said slowly. "Avery Selwyn from the Eastern Coalition grant scandal?" I froze. I hadn't heard of that. He explained that Selwyn had once been tied to a now-buried controversy involving illegal data manipulation in federally funded education studies. He'd disappeared right as the investigation was supposed to begin. No one had seen him since. Daniel agreed to meet, but he warned me, "If this is real, and it sounds like it is, then you're in deeper than you know. If someone's resurrecting Selwyn's old playbook, they're not amateurs. They're architects." Just as I hung up, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was of my daughter, taken from behind, walking alone down a quiet street I didn't recognize.
It was nighttime.
She was wearing the blue coat I gave her last Christmas. The image was grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakably her. Under the photo was a timestamp. It was from 20 minutes ago. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. They weren't bluffing. They were close. And now I wasn't just being watched, I was being followed. Every step I took was being measured. Every call traced. Every move anticipated. This wasn't just about me anymore. The danger was real. And immediate. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I texted. *, please call me. It's urgent. I need to know you're okay. *. No reply. Then came the final twist of the night, the thing that sealed the fear so deeply into my bones I could feel it in every breath. As I stepped out onto my porch to clear my head, I found an envelope sitting on the top stair, weighted down by a smooth black stone. No name. No address. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, and written in precise, blood-red ink were the words, Asterisk, every father makes sacrifices. Yours is overdue. Asterisk. I stumbled back inside, heart hammering, and locked the door behind me, double-checking every window. Someone had been there, right at my doorstep, while I was inside. Watching. Waiting. I knew then that I was out of time. Whatever I had uncovered, whatever secrets my daughter was hiding, whatever had happened to Selwyn, and now possibly Melanie, none of it was fiction. This was real. And I was no longer chasing a mystery. I was running out of ways to survive it. To be continued. I didn't sleep for the next 48 hours. I couldn't. My world had condensed into one narrow, paranoid lane, checking the locks on my doors, triple scanning every face behind me in the grocery store, keeping my phone in airplane mode, and taping over the laptop camera like it mattered anymore. Every message I'd received, every photo, every name, every vanishing file had brought me closer to a place I couldn't turn back from. But it all still felt just out of reach, like I was standing inches away from the truth but too blindfolded to see it. Then, as if the story itself grew tired of keeping secrets, the ground shifted beneath me. It started with a knock, gentle, hesitant, but deliberate. I peered through the peephole expecting a courier or maybe another anonymous envelope taped to the railing. But it wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel. My friend.
My lifeline.
He wasn't supposed to arrive until the following day, but there he was, coat damp from the rain, dark circles under his eyes, clutching a flash drive in one hand and a small stack of papers in the other. I opened the door without a word. He stepped inside and looked at me with something between exhaustion and disbelief.
"We need to talk," he said.
We sat down at the table I'd once used to grade term papers, now covered in files, printouts, and sleepless coffee mugs. He slid the flash drive toward me. "There's something I didn't tell you on the phone," he began. "When you mentioned Selwyn, I started digging. But I didn't just look into the Eastern Coalition mess. I went back further. Like 25 years further." He handed me a photo, yellowed at the edges. It was of a university symposium. 6 faculty members lined up on stage. One of them was unmistakably Selwyn, younger, sharper. But my eyes locked onto the man standing 2 people to his right. It was me. Only it wasn't me. Not exactly. He had my face, my build, even the same tired eyes. But the name beneath the caption didn't read James Merrick. It read Jonathan Merrick, a twin I never had. At least, that's what I thought, until Daniel opened the folder and began reading from a federal research grant issued in 1997 under the Department of Educational Innovation. Jonathan Merrick, listed as co-author. Cross-referenced with faculty at 3 separate universities between 1995 and 2003. But here's the kicker, he's also listed as deceased. Died in 2004. Cause of death, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Body cremated. No next of kin. I felt like the floor fell out from under me. I told Daniel I didn't have a twin. No siblings. My parents were long gone, and I was an only child. But he just nodded, his expression unreadable. "I don't think you're related by blood. I think your identity was mirrored." He leaned forward, his voice low. "You said earlier that you started getting weird emails after the donation. But what if that donation triggered a system built to recognize a name? What if you weren't the first Merrick in their network? What if this Jonathan Merrick was part of a research identity used by Selwyn and his inner circle to launder academic data, and when you, James Merrick, showed up with a large donation under that name, it set off alarms in a system designed to protect itself?" I couldn't breathe. I remembered filling out the donation paperwork, how meticulous the university had been about names, spelling, legal documentation. I remembered the brief look the rep gave me when she first read it. Confused. Just for a second. And suddenly, everything made sense. My name hadn't been targeted by chance. It was a ghost key, one that unlocked doors no one expected to ever open again. I'd resurrected something. Or someone. And then Daniel delivered the final blow. "I think your daughter knew." I shook my head.
No.
Not possible. She was smart, yes, guarded, absolutely, but involved? He pulled out one last sheet of paper, smaller than the others. A page from a thesis draft. The title, Cognitive Mirroring and the Ethics of Academic Identity Models. Author, Olivia Merrick. Advisor, Dr. Avery Selwyn. Date, 2018. My daughter's name. Selwyn's name. Right there.
Together.
She was writing about it, Daniel said. This theory about universities creating mirrored faculty models, taking real identities, modifying them slightly, and inserting them into academic systems to qualify for duplicate funding. It was genius. Illegal, but genius. They created phantom instructors and researchers using variations of real people's identities. Your daughter's thesis was about the risks and consequences of such models being discovered. I think she got too close to the truth. And then Selwyn vanished. I stood up, my knees barely holding me. If that was true, then Olivia hadn't just withdrawn from school. She'd gone underground. Maybe she'd found out too much. Maybe she tried to expose it. Or maybe, just maybe, she was helping build it from the inside. And what if the person she was protecting wasn't herself, but me? What if every lie she'd told, every evasive answer, was her trying to keep me from walking straight into the same trap that had swallowed Selwyn? Daniel's flash drive held more emails, buried archives, and one last surprise. A zip file found on a defunct university server. It was encrypted, but the title of the folder was simple. JM 1997, my initials. The year that research grant had been awarded. The same year my life had supposedly been mirrored into someone else's file. As I stared at that name, one final message buzzed across my phone. No number. No signature. Just one line. Asterisk, there was never one Merrick. There were always two. Asterisk. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about myself, my daughter, this entire twisted web, unraveled into a truth I might never be able to fully understand. To be continued. I didn't sleep for the next 48 hours. I couldn't. My world had condensed into one narrow, paranoid lane, checking the locks on my doors, triple scanning every face behind me in the grocery store, keeping my phone in airplane mode, and taping over the laptop camera like it mattered anymore. Every message I'd received, every photo, every name, every vanishing file had brought me closer to a place I couldn't turn back from. But it all still felt just out of reach, like I was standing inches away from the truth, but too blindfolded to see it. Then, as if the story itself grew tired of keeping secrets, the ground shifted beneath me. It started with a knock, gentle, hesitant, but deliberate. I peered through the peephole expecting a courier or maybe another anonymous envelope taped to the railing. But it wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel, my friend, my lifeline. He wasn't supposed to arrive until the following day, but there he was, coat damp from the rain, dark circles under his eyes, clutching a flash drive in one hand and a small stack of papers in the other. I opened the door without a word. He stepped inside and looked at me with something between exhaustion and disbelief.
We need to talk, he said.
We sat down at the table I'd once used to grade term papers, now covered in files, printouts, and sleepless coffee mugs. He slid the flash drive toward me. There's something I didn't tell you on the phone, he began. When you mentioned Selwyn, I started digging. But I didn't just look into the Eastern Coalition mess. I went back further. Like 25 years further. He handed me a photo, yellowed at the edges. It was of a university symposium. 6 faculty members lined up on stage. One of them was unmistakably Selwyn, younger, sharper. But my eyes locked onto the man standing 2 people to his right. It was me. Only it wasn't me. Not exactly. He had my face, my build, even the same tired eyes. But the name beneath the caption didn't read James Merrick. It read Jonathan Merrick, a twin I never had. At least, that's what I thought, until Daniel opened the folder and began reading from a federal research grant issued in 1997 under the Department of Educational Innovation. Jonathan Merrick, listed as co-author, cross-referenced with faculty at 3 separate universities between 1995 and 2003. But here's the kicker, he's also listed as deceased. Died in 2004. Cause of death, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Body cremated. No next of kin. I felt like the floor fell out from under me. I told Daniel I didn't have a twin. No siblings. My parents were long gone, and I was an only child. but he just nodded, his expression unreadable. I don't think you're related by blood. I think your identity was mirrored. He leaned forward, his voice low. You said earlier that you started getting weird emails after the donation. But what if that donation triggered a system built to recognize a name? What if you weren't the first Merrick in their network? What if this Jonathan Merrick was part of a research identity used by Selwyn and his inner circle to launder academic data, and when you, James Merrick, showed up with a large donation under that name, it set off alarms in a system designed to protect itself? I couldn't breathe. I remembered filling out the donation paperwork, how meticulous the university had been about name spelling, legal documentation. I remembered the brief look the rep gave me when she first read it. Confused. Just for a second. And suddenly, everything made sense. My name hadn't been targeted by chance. It was a ghost key, one that unlocked doors no one expected to ever open again. I'd resurrected something. Or someone. And then Daniel delivered the final blow. I think your daughter knew. I shook my head.
No.
Not possible. She was smart, yes, guarded, absolutely, but involved? He pulled out one last sheet of paper, smaller than the others. A page from a thesis draft. The title, Cognitive Mirroring and the Ethics of Academic Identity Models. Author, Olivia Merrick. Advisor, Dr. Avery Selwyn. Date, 2018. My daughter's name. Selwyn's name. Right there. Together. She was writing about it, Daniel said. This theory about universities creating mirrored faculty models, taking real identities, modifying them slightly, and inserting them into academic systems to qualify for duplicate funding. It was genius. Illegal, but genius. They created phantom instructors and researchers using variations of real people's identities. Your daughter's thesis was about the risks and consequences of such models being discovered. I think she got too close to the truth. And then Selwyn vanished. I stood up, my knees barely holding me. If that was true, then Olivia hadn't just withdrawn from school. She'd gone underground. Maybe she'd found out too much. Maybe she tried to expose it. Or maybe, just maybe, she was helping build it from the inside. And what if the person she was protecting wasn't herself, but me? What if every lie she'd told, every evasive answer, was her trying to keep me from walking straight into the same trap that had swallowed Selwyn? Daniel's flash drive held more emails, buried archives, and one last surprise. A zip file found on a defunct university server. It was encrypted, but the title of the folder was simple. JM 1997, my initials. The year that research grant had been awarded. The same year my life had supposedly been mirrored into someone else's file. As I stared at that name, one final message buzzed across my phone. No number. No signature. Just one line. Asterisk, there was never one Merrick. There were always two. Asterisk. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about myself, my daughter, this entire twisted web, unraveled into a truth I might never be able to fully understand. To be continued. For weeks after the fire, I drifted through my days like a man suspended between two timelines. One where I was just James Merrick, a father, an overlooked educator with a modest life and a weather diploma hanging crooked on the wall, and another where I had unknowingly been the cornerstone of a sprawling academic conspiracy, the unwitting namesake of a program built on deception, illusion, and shadows. In the official report, there was no mention of the underground lab. No explosion. No Selwyn. The library had suffered minor system damage due to an electrical fault. End of story. The university issued a statement thanking the facilities team and announcing another phase of renovations, this time to improve digital security infrastructure. They buried it like they buried everything else. Daniel left town the morning after the incident. He didn't say goodbye, just left a single text. Asterisk, they know who I am now. Be careful. Asterisk, I haven't heard from him since. I kept the USB. Locked it away in a place I hoped no one would ever find. I still don't know how to explain what's on it, not fully. The files Olivia uploaded are protected by layers of encryption I haven't cracked. I tried once or twice, then stopped. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe she left it as a reminder of what we survived, of what we exposed, and of what still lurks beneath the polished brochures and inspirational banners hanging outside those ivy-covered academic halls. Every time I walk past a campus now, I see it differently. Not as a place of knowledge, but a machine. A machine built not just to educate, but to replicate. Manufacture identities. Feed rankings. Mask failures behind fabricated success. Selwyn was just the face of something much older. And Olivia, wherever she is now, is chasing the root of it. The last message I received from her came through an encrypted email server, routed through half a dozen countries before it reached me. There was no greeting, no sign-off, just a short note and a photo. The message read, *, I'm safe. The names you're looking for are not in the files, they're in the funding contracts. Follow the foundations. And Dad, I'm proud of you. Don't let them rewrite your story. The photo was a street mural somewhere in South America. It depicted a figure standing in front of a shattered mirror, half of their reflection replaced by a mosaic of strangers' faces. In bold paint across the wall, someone had scrawled, *, truth lives between the versions we forget to question. *. I printed it and framed it above my desk. In time, the noise died down. My bank accounts were restored. The strange calls stopped. My name was quietly removed from the library's official donor list. It was like I'd never existed in their records at all, which ironically felt more honest than what they'd fabricated. Life returned to something resembling normal, but I wasn't the same. I started teaching again, but I stopped lecturing from the curriculum. I began telling my students stories instead, stories about the things we ignore, the systems that sculpt our lives without our permission, the difference between a fact and a manufactured truth. Some of them listened. Most just wanted to pass their finals. But every once in a while, I'd see it. The look in a student's eyes when something clicks and they realize the world is far more complex than their syllabus suggests. Sometimes I wonder if Olivia will ever come back. If we'll sit across from each other again and talk, not as father and daughter, but as survivors of something too big to name. Maybe she'll tell me what really happened with Selwyn. Maybe she'll tell me what the merit protocol truly was. Maybe she won't say anything at all. Maybe all I'll get is that mural and a few encrypted words. But that's okay. Because in her silence, she gave me the one thing that had been stripped from me for so long: agency. She trusted me to decide who I was outside of what was forged in my name. And that meant more than any revelation ever could. Now, when I look at my degree, framed, faded, tucked between old books, I don't see it as a symbol of failure. I see it as defiance. Proof that I earned something real in a world built on illusions. That paper might not hold value in anyone else's eyes, but in mine, it's the one thing they couldn't fabricate. The one thing they couldn't take. My name. My story. My truth. And as for the university, they're still standing. Still accepting donations. Still churning out polished graduates with digital footprints scrubbed clean. But every system has its cracks. And Olivia is still out there, prying those cracks open one by one. If anyone can burn the machine from the inside, it's her. So I wait. I teach. I remember. And sometimes, just before sleep, I check the sky for places I know she's hiding, because even ghosts need to breathe. And that's the thing no one tells you. Truth never dies. It just hides behind the names we forget to question.